iyong pinili ay matinud-anon, malinawon, sa Ginoo may bendisyon. Danggo pa karon, basin matuman ra pohon, kausaban sa atong eleksyon. Ako kanunay naglaom, kabaguhan maangkon, bisan lisod ato gihapong himuon. Pilion ta ang butan, sa balaod nagatuman, ang way pihig kabusman o adunahan. Sa Diyos siya mahadlukon, kinaiyahan maampingon, kinabuhi alang kaniya bilinhon. Ang angayan nga kandidato, maugayon atong iboto, dili tungod lang kay kailang pamigo. Kung sa kwarta kita mudawat, ang udaong basig mangawat, butal sa imong konsyensya, dili tungod sa kwarta.
This day I call the heavens and the earth as witnesses against you, that I have set before you life and death, blessings and curses. Now choose life, so that you and your children may live. In the book of Exodus, we read how God called his people out of slavery and entered into a covenant with them, such that if the chosen people obey the laws of the covenant, they will become his people, and he will be their God under his blessings and protection. What were the laws of the covenant? These are the 10 Commandments, a set of 10 moral laws that should guide our behavior before God and before each other. Worship God alone. Keep his name in highest esteem. Keep his Sabbath holy. Honor your father and mother. Respect the sanctity of human life. Keep human sexuality sacred. Uphold private property. Speak the truth at all times. Maintain the sacredness of marriage. Uphold social justice. Thus, in Deuteronomy, Moses equates obedience to these moral laws with choosing life itself. For obedience to these bring blessing, while disregarding them bring downfall in our life as a free nation. God did not counsel us to choose what we like, whether we like life or death. In fact, he exhorts us to choose life, to choose the moral option, to live holy and blameless in his sight as people of the covenant. Such should be our option in the face of the electoral process, to choose life, to choose what is right. For elections are and should be a most sacred exercise, the practice of our freedom, not to choose what we like, rather with the guidance of the moral laws that our God has set before us. Thus, we call this webinar Choosing Life Forum, in order to make this sacred act of suffrage bear positive fruits for our life and for the life of our nation. Welcome to Choosing Life Forum.
Maayong adlaw kanatong tanan. Sa makausap pa, welcome ning atong online forum, ang Choosing Life. Sa atong mahinumduman, ang unang hugna nining atong forum, inubanan ni Bishop Abet Uy o ni Father Ado Hubak, naghisgot sa kabalaanon sa pagpili. Kay kini nga katungod, gasa gikan sa Dios. Sa daang kasabutan, atong nabatyagan ang kabubuton sa Dios diha sa iyang pag-awhag sa iyang mga katawhan sa pagpili gayud sa kinabuhi aron maangkon nila ang panalangin. Kung atong tan-awon pag-ayo, kini nga awhag gikan sa Dios alang usab kanatong tanan diha sa atong panahon karon. Giawhag kita sa Dios sa paggamit sa atong salabutan ug gasa sa pagpili alang lamang sa kaayuhan gayud. Karon atong pagahimuon ang ikaduhang hugna ning atong tulumanon ug dako kaayo natong garbo ug pasalamat nga atong ikauban karon ang Vicar General sa Diocese sa Tagbilaran, si Msgr Harold Parilla. Siya pagahinabion sa usa nato katinunan sa Holy Name University nga si Ernest Tambis. Ug sa walay paglangan-langan, ania ang ikaduhang hugna ning atong tulumanon nga atong giuluhan og Voting Right, Upholding the Truth. One-on-one with Msgr Harold Parilla.
Mayong adlaw kanatong tanan, ilabi na sa itong mga online viewers, sa mga viewers sa ito diri karon sa studio. Once again, I am Ernest si Tambis. O kauban nato karon, no, si Msgr Harold Parilla, nga andam ka natong magpaambit kabahin niining atong tema sa ikaduhang episode sa Voters Education Series nga naguluhan, Voting Right, Upholding the Truth. So once again, Msgr, welcome to our second program. And of course, kaming mga kabatanunan, uhaw, of course, apil pa ko sa mga kabatanunan, no? Uhaw kami kayo sa mga kalambuan or uhaw kami sa mga learnings nga among mga pangutana. Every now and then, daghan kaming mga pangutana. And of course, we are thankful, no, for giving us this time to answer some clarification, especially with regards to the upcoming election. So, magsugod na kita sa atong unang pangutana. Okay, so Msgr, kasagaran natong madunggan, no, sa of course during election period, kining atong gingon nga butar sumala sa imuhang konsensya or vote according to your conscience. Apan ang kadaghanan nato, no, of course to the average person like me, no, diutay lamang ang mga nahibaluan. Dili pud kayo lawom ning atong nasabtan kabahin ning konsensya. Unsa bagyo di ay ang ipasabot ning atong word nga konsensya or conscience?
Salamat Ernest sa imong pangutana. First of all, mo greet ko sa tanan nga nagsunod nato nining maong activity nga gipasiugdahan sa Holy Name University. For example, mo greet ko sa ato ang admin sa HNU nga gipanguluhan ni Father Dudes, usab sa faculty o staff, ug sa of course sa mga estudyante nga nagtuon sa maong prestihiyoso nga universidad. Akong greetings usab sa atong talahorong obispo, Bishop Abet, ug sa mga kaparian sa Diocese, no. Nindot kaayo ang imong question, Ernest, no. In fact, kanang question of conscience is one of the most complicated discussions. Bisag mobasa ta sa kanang Catechism of the Catholic Church, naay section diha, no, if I'm not mistaken, number 1770 to 1802, imong makita diha ang discussion on conscience. Kung mobasa ka, imong ma-realize nga komplikado ang gisulti sa tradisyon mahitungod sa conscience. Pero what is helpful to me, I think, is to go back to Gaudium et Spes, number 16 of the Second Vatican Council. Mingon ang maong document nga, ang conscience ko, no, is the deepest core of ourselves, where we can listen to the voice of God, telling us what to do and what to avoid. So murag kinalawman nga aspeto sa atong kaugalingon, diin madungog nato ang tingog sa Ginoo nga nagsulti nga mobuhat og maayo og mulikay og dautan. So that is the fundamental description of conscience given to us in the teachings of the church. Now, if you scour through the document, especially in 1772 to 1802 of the Catechism of the Catholic Church, you will find out two basic assertions in the teaching of the church. Number one is, you follow your conscience, sundang imong konsensya. O ikaduha, purmaha ang imong konsensya. Educate your conscience. So mo na'y mga fundamental nga pagtulunan. First, what is conscience? Mao na ang kinalawman nga bahin sa imong kaugalingon, diin makadungog ka sa tingog sa Dios nga nagsulti nga buhata ang maayo ug likayi ang dautan. Unya, mingon ang simbahan, sunda ang imong konsensya. Okay, follow your conscience and then educate your conscience.
Okay, thank you, Father. I would just like to quote you on buhata ang sakto ug likay ang dautan. No, something like we can actually hear it within ourselves. Just to follow up, no, Father, would it be also possible for a person, no, to misinterpret what is good and what is bad? And of course, after misinterpreting it, of course, we commit mistakes also and deceiving ourselves that what we do is something that is good or something that is bad. Would it be possible also, Father?
Oh, insakto kayo na Ernest, no? A very good question. That is why in church teaching, we are also given a very important exhortation. Kato akong giingon bitaw nga, you follow your conscience, but at the same time, you educate your conscience. Because along the way, because of our influences and because of the tendency to sin, we might mistake what is wrong for what is supposed to be the right thing to do. Posibleng magbaylo tungod sa atong biases, sa atong influences, o tungod sa atong lack of information panalitan. So, maunay importante kaayo nga, not only to follow your conscience, but at the same time to educate it. Now, let me explore some more, no, on the concept of conscience. Kay I'm sure sa mga naminaw ron, nangutana gyud, so unsa man ang conscience gyud, no? As I mentioned earlier, that is the part of ourselves, the deepest core of ourselves, nga makadungog ta sa tingog sa Ginoo sa pagbuhat og maayo og paglikay og dautan. Now, I have found a book of the many books I have tried to consult. I have found this very, very important book written by Richard M. Gula. Richard Gula is one of the leading moral theologians in Northern America today, and he wrote a book entitled Reason Informed by Faith. I'm sure Bishop Abet also is following the writings of this important moral theologian. So sa maong libro, iyang gigamit ang kanang language sa psychology to help explain what conscience is. Mingon siya, no? At some point in the book, he says, one way to understand conscience is to differentiate it from superego. Unsa man ang superego? Sa psychology, giingnan ta nga, sa atong structure, sa atong pagkatao, natay gitawag og ego, natay gitawag og id, natay gitawag og superego. Di ba? Sa mga students sa psychology, nakasabot sila nga, kaning superego, mauni ang tingog sa mga authority figures sa atong kinabuhi. Pananglitan, samtang nagdako ta, makadungog ta sa tingog sa atong nanay. Oy, ayaw na hilabte. Ayaw na buhata. Kung naibisita, tago ka sa imong kwarto. Oh, these are the voices of authority as we were growing up. Unya nag-eskwela na to, madugang diha sa superego ang tingog sa atong mga teacher. Tingog ni Ma'am Bidyo, panalitan nga mayon nga dautan na, insakto na, no? So they impose on us their own moral norms. And they accumulate in us as we grow up. Unya, as we grow older, tingali ang tingog sa atong parish priest, no? Si Father Ervin, panalitan mo wali niya, musulti siya nga, mauni ang angay, mauni ang dili angay. Unya, through the years, ma-accumulate ta og voices of authority nga mo comprise sa atong superego. Now, unsa may impact sa superego na to? Ang impact sa superego mauni, nga mosunod ta sa ilang gisulti, tungod kay we want approval from them. Di ba? So panlitan, musunod ta sa atong nanay, not really because we agree with her, but because we don't want to offend her. Because we want love, we want acceptance. These are basic drives as we are growing up. Mao na nga, at some point in our lives, mubuhat tag usa ka butang, dili tungod kay we are convinced that it's important, but only because we want to earn the approval and we want to avoid the rejection of these authority figures which are important to us. Okay. Now, where does conscience come in? Conscience comes in the understanding that at some point in our lives, we have to mature. And one aspect of maturity is when you begin to think for yourself. Kana bang mupili kag mga butang o mubuhat ka o unsay insakto, dili tungod kay mao nagisulti sa imong nanay, dili tungod kay mao nagisulti ni Ma'am Bidyo sa klase, kundi dili tungod kay na-recognize nimo on your own based on the values that you see that it is the best thing to do. Their conscience operates. Conscience is that which makes us decide on the basis of values which we recognize.
No, sungindot kahit ito. No? So I will just like to ask you, Father, for clarification. No? Kanang, like for instance, kanang ang usa ka ginikanan, no, kabus sila for instance, no, niya kanang of course wala sila gikaon apan naalay jutay lang ka for instance bahaw siguro niya wala na lagi kaon niyang anak. At some point, is it a practice of conscience for a parent not to choose to eat because he wants his child to eat first before him or her? Is it somewhat like that you mean?
Okay, if a parent chooses not to eat and maybe prioritize the children, and she does it because she operates on a certain value nga tungod din sa akong gugma sa akong anak. That is conscience.
Okay. So,
Okay? Pero kung moingon ang inahan nga di ko mo kaon kay aron mahibaw-an ko sa ahong bana, unya ahong bana mo sa mutog angay naho. Okay? Nya mo sa mutog approve naho iya kong dawaton even more nga iyang butan nga asawa. Then that might be the voice of the superego. Because now she is basing her decision on the opinion and values of other people, not really coming from her own. O panlitan ang bata. Kanang bata ang mumatatag sayo. Ngano mumatag sayo kay maglikay ta nga kasab-an tang nanay. Ug mao na imong motivation nga matakag sayo kay naglikay ka nga kasab-an kang nanay, super ego na. Because that is coming from the motivation nga kinahanglan di ko kasab-an, kinahanglan ma-accept ko, ma-approve ko ni nanay. Pero at some point si Ernest mumata og sayo kay college student og accounting. Mumata sayo kay sayang una-una I have to be in school early because I need to prepare myself for classes, because I need to understand the lessons. Now he's starting to operate from conscience. Because he sees the value of studying very well by himself. Kay kung ang problema sa superego, kung nagsige tagbuhat tungod kay mao ni expectation sa uban, kung wala na ang uban nga nagtan-aw nato, then we stop doing it. But if it comes from a certain appreciation, personal appreciation of value, then you start doing it even if people are not watching because you yourself recognize its importance. Mao nay conscience. So now, for example, if you do something, karon ni anhi ka, nag-moderate ka sa atong interview. Okay. Now you ask yourself, what is operative behind this action? Is it the superego or is it conscience? Now, if you're here because it is a requirement, because you don't want to offend the organizers of this forum, then probably you're operating from the superego. But if you're here because you believe in the importance of voters' education, nga naagyud tay matudlo sa atong mga estudyante along the way bisag ginagmay, aron magiyahan sila sa pagpili, then probably that is conscience. Okay.
all right.
So I hope the distinction that is given to us in the book coming from psychology is helpful in understanding what is conscience. Yeah.
Daghang kay salamat ana no Monsignor. Unya para sa tong mga viewers, we want to relate it to this coming election.
Very good.
How we use this conscience this coming election. Let's take for example, Father, if I am a voter, no? And moingon ko nga ana ra ko mo decide kinsa akong butaran depende sa kung kinsa ang gusto sa kadaghanan or kung kinsa ang gusto sa kung mama and papa. Is it a good practice of conscience?
Okay, very good question, no? Again, mubalik ta sa distinctions, no? When you begin to choose the candidate that you're going to vote for, you ask yourself, no, where is the motivation or the rationale coming from? So for example, kung mupili ka aning mga kandidato, tungod kay amaoni ang opinion sa akong mga barkada, and I want to be in. I want to be part because there is peer pressure. Kay basig ma-ostracize ko, nga di ko pareha nila og kandidato, then obviously, coming from our earlier discussion, this is the superego operating. Oh. So when we say, vote according to your conscience, I think what we really mean is, identify your values, your personal values. And you ask yourself, how is this translated in the personalities nga atong gipili para sa usa ka posisyon? So for example, if you value honesty, di ba? You recognize it as a personal value, you find it very important, then you look at the candidates and ask yourself, who among them resonate my value? And then I will choose according to that value. Di ba? Oh, for example, you value transparency in yourself. Di ba? In school, you want to give accounting for all the expenses, even if it is not demanded. Because importante ni mo na nga limpyo gyud ka, wala kay kanang kapasanginlan nga nang urakot ka one way or another. Then you ask yourself, how is this personal value reflected in the options given to me in the elections? And then I will choose the candidate that best represents the value which I hold dear to myself. So that is voting according to conscience. Mao bitaw nga namagud tay danger karon o kanang gitawag og bandwagon mentality. Panlitan og kinsay kusog, kinsay taas sa survey, di man gud ta gustong mabilong sa losing side. We want to be winners all the time. Now, if you operate on that mindset, then I think you are not voting according to conscience. You are voting according to superego. Because you want to be in, you want to belong, you want to be part of the winning team all the time. And I don't see how is that morabag representative of the human and Christian values that you hold dear to yourself.
So to sum up it now, Monsignor, conscience is not somewhat like something that is pleasurable, but something like you hold into analyzing or weighing also the gravity or the importance of your values, and somewhat like kanang umingon kung unsay something ngindot para nako, mao kini ang konsensya. That is not something like a practice of conscience. Am I right?
Yes. What's important, I think, in the recognition of conscience is, first of all, you identify what is important to you. What are your values as a person? What do you hold dear? Nga which are non-negotiables to you. Ang ubang ang language ani sa business planning is, what are your non-negotiables? Kada bang dili nimo mahimong i-compromise. Dili nimo mahimong buhian basta-basta. Mao na imong values. Now, once you start deciding on the basis of these values, then that is conscience. But once you start deciding on the basis of what others hold, which may probably be contradictory to yours, but only because maunay sikat, maunay popular, then probably you are still an infant in terms of psychological maturity because you still let others decide for yourself.
Alright. So I hope medyo klaro na, no? Sa atong mga online viewers karon, labi na sa mga medyo ka English ba mi, no? I hope you understand the concept of conscience. Another question, Father, is with regards to that. Is there also I heard this word also, informed conscience.
Informed conscience.
So unsa man po kahulugan ni Father? Ug unsa man to kalahian atong conscience ra nga play natong gihisgutan ganina?
Okay. Pagsugod na ko og explain sa pagtulunan sa simbahan, I started by saying, ang duha ka basic tenets nga gitudlo is obey your conscience and then form your conscience. Kanang informed conscience, mao na ang conscience nga niagi og constant formation and education. Diba? Kay panlitan, mubalik ta sa akong assertion nga conscience means you operate from values. The other question is, but how do you form your value? Diha musod ang formation of values. So how do you form your value? How do you recognize that something is important? It can start by the authority figures around you. Di ba? Mingon si nanay nga, panglimpyo diya sa kusina. Oh. At the beginning, naglimpyo lang katungod kay nisulti sa nanay. But later on, makarealize ka nga, importante yun ang cleanliness is next to godliness. Or you imbibe it as a personal value, then when you clean it, it's no longer the superego coming in, but the conscience itself. Oh. So, how do you form your value? Naitulo ka levels, I think, no? The first level is you form your value as a human person. So, you listen to sources of wisdom as a human person. Unsa man na? Mga sources, mga gikanan sa atong kinaadman, isip tao. Kana, tingog sa atong mga ginikanan. Tingog sa atong mga teachers. We learn from them. Tingog sa mga experts, anang linyaha. We learn from them. Di ba? Muna atong sources of wisdom as a human being, as a human person. Pero imong ipalaw man na as a Christian, there are other sources of wisdom. For example, if you're a Christian, one very important resource is the Bible. Di ba? Kung gusto ka mo form og values, unsa importante nimo, you look at the values which are being taught in the Bible. Diba? As a Christian. Now, the third level, if you are a Catholic, you go further. Another source of wisdom as a Catholic is not only the Bible, but the voice of the magisterium, the voice of the authentic teachers of the faith. So you listen to them so that you will also share in the values of the entire church. So kung maminaw ka ana, as a human person, as a Christian, and as a Catholic, there you will find several sources of moral wisdom that will help you form your values. So diha mahitabo ang formation of values. Our values are formed by our observation. Our values are formed by our listening. Our values are formed by our humility. Okay? Because if you are not able to identify clearly the sources of your moral wisdom, and I think that is happening to our young people and even namong mga tiguang na. Maminaw lang ta bisag kinsa o bisag asa. And so, ang value nga atong ma-form, ang conscience nga atong ma-develop, most likely mahimong erroneous conscience because we don't educate our values according to these very important sources of moral wisdom. Mao mitoy akong gikaguluhan usahay karon sa atong electoral experience kay usahay asa man maminaw ang mga batan-on kinsa may influences sa ilang formation of values. TikTok, fake news, unverified data coming from social media. Unya, og mutingog ang mga obispo, immediately, dili paminahon. Kay kuno colored, kuno biased. Mao na nga, para nako, ang actually kining atong gihimong forum, I think this is our contribution to the formation of values, which will lead to the formation of right conscience. Mao na nga akong appeal kanunay sa tanang tao, dili lang sa mga kabataan, mao nga kanang let us keep an open and humble mind. Kanabang we don't close ourselves to the voices of those who are very important in the formation of our values. So panlitan ako, di lang ko musulti no kung isa akong ganahan nga kandidato kay nalabay circular gipalibot si Bishop nga you cannot express your preferences even in social media no. So ako na ako'y ganahan nga kandidato pero wa man ko mohunong og paminaw. Wa ko mohunong og paminaw sa gipangsulti sa ubang kandidato kay they may be saying something which will appeal to my personal values. Kay once nga mupili ta nya this time nakapili na ta nya musira na ta, muundang na ang atong education of conscience. And there is a high risk that we will develop an erroneous conscience. So mo nay mo na akong ikasulti mahitungod sa formation of conscience. Kanang informed conscience, that is a conscience that is going through constantly education and listening in humility and trying to learn so that we can really understand the issues, and we will know the candidates to vote for on the basis of the values that they hold, which reflect my own personal values. So tanaw nako, kanang formation of values is an ongoing experience. Yeah. And it is important that when we form our values, we listen to the helpful sources of wisdom. Not just from anything and from anyone, because we might end up imbibing the wrong values and forming the erroneous conscience.
I would like to agree with you with that, Father, no? That is, information is very important nowadays, especially in the formation of public opinion, and especially this time, no, disinformation and misinformation are prevalent. My follow-up question regarding those, Father, with the informed conscience also in the part, is it morally bad for a person to refuse to listen and to learn with the truth, especially?
Very good question, Ernest, no? Kay mubalik ta sa atong duha ka basic tenets nga gitudlo sa simbahan. Number one is follow your conscience. Always follow your conscience. Even if at some point it can be proven nga erroneous ang imong conscience, ingon ang simbahan, follow it. Because there's no other way nga maka-assert ka nga kanang gawasnon ka, di ba? Nga libre ka nga mopili. It's only in the following of your conscience. Pero equally important, ang ikaduha nga tenet, katong giingon nga, okay, follow your conscience, but educate your conscience. In other words, I think we will be held morally responsible for the kind of conscience that we have developed. So mayon ka nga, follow your conscience mga Father, so pili ko sa akong gusto. Okay, the other question is, giunsa man nimo pagpurma ang imong konsensya, nga nihatod nimo sa maong pagpili. I think God will hold you accountable for the kind of conscience that you have formed.
Wow. No, so, in short, Father, also, we have discussed the informed conscience. So what is the implication of this informed conscience in the electoral process that we are in right now?
Exactly as I was saying earlier, nga, umingkag informed conscience in the context of the elections, I think ang implikasyon na mao nga, una, if you want to choose from conscience, you try to identify unsay imong mga values as a person. And then, having identified your values as a person, look at the list of candidates and get to know them. And try to find out who among them reflects your own set of values. And then you can choose from that. Maybe, makaingon ka atubangan sa Ginoo, Lord, I am exercising my conscience, not the superego of hundreds or millions of people around me.
Okay. You know, Monsignor, no, usually people would actually misinterpret the involvement of the church, especially this election period. Ang kung karong pangutana is, unsa day role karon sa simbahan aron kita makabaton og informed conscience?
Very good question, Ernest. No? For the longest time, ang papel sa simbahan, nagyo diha sa area of formation of conscience. Di ba? Nagtudlo man tag values, Christian and Catholic values. Mo man atong gitudlo. And along the way, apil ana ang tudlo sa mga tao unsaon pagpili og insakto. In so many gatherings of people for voters education, mo man nagitudlo unsa may mga kalagdaan sa pagpili og maayong kandidato. I think the role of the church is found primarily in that regard, in helping young people recognize their values and looking at these candidates and asking kung reflect ba sila sa values nga atong gunitan. I think naagyo diha ang papel sa simbahan. Now, in some places, nag-endorse gyud ang simbahan og kandidato. Sa ilang discernment, they felt nga it is high time to help people decide by endorsing a specific candidate. In the diocese, as I mentioned, the bishop has issued a circular coming from our meeting saying, ang atong diocese, we will be, the clergy in particular, we will be non-partisan, but not neutral. And ang ipasabot lang ana nga dili ta mo endorso og kandidato, pero magpadayon tag tudlo unsay insakto ug unsay dili. Magpadayon ta sa tong buhat sa paghulma sa konsensya sa mga tao, pinaagi sa pagsulti ug unsay angay nga mga values nga atong huptan ug atong makit-an sa atong mga kandidato. So that ako personally, this is my opinion, I think we should stick to that primary role in the formation of conscience and allow our people to make their choice from their conscience. So we form their conscience and then allow them to exercise their conscience. Akong kahadlukan magud ang endorsement is basig mahimong super ego ang endorsement sa simbahan. Kanang mabutar na lang ang mga tao. Dili tungod kay na nakakita sila sa values nga gi-resonate sa usa ka kandidato. Kung dili tungod kay giingon ni Father, super ego na pud na. Kay dili naman na imo ha. Ang iyahan naman ang imong gi-adapt lang para sa imong kaugalingon without a personal deliberation of your own set of values. So, in short, ang papel sa simbahan, I think, ang po ni gisulti ni Pope Benedict XVI, ni Joseph Ratzinger, a very respected theologian in the contemporary Catholic Church. Mingon siya, the role of the church is really in trying to form the conscience of people. Our role is trying to help people understand their values and to live according to those values. Kanang pag-usob sa katilingban, kanang mga buhat sa actual nga pagpadagan sa gobyerno, ato nang ihatag sa mga laygo. Ang trabaho sa clergy is the formation of conscience, which is not easy because you don't see immediate results. Sometimes you get tired. Na ibang mga pare mingon nga sus pila naman ta katuig ga voters education. Mura nagpamaula na imong ang papangig og sinulti, ayaw dawat og kwarta, unya inig actual na mudawat man gihapon. So it becomes very frustrating. But that is where we are. That is what we are supposed to do as clergy, as hierarchy in the church. We let the lay people run the government. We let the lay people do the actual partisan politics. Our role is to help them understand what values are reflective of the gospel values and how should we choose candidates on the basis of those values.
Okay. Based sa itong mga discussion earlier, no, Monsignor, and of course, nothing against someone, no, for those people who have mentioned this, natay mga nadunggan nga, or of course, I think we hear this a lot, kanang muingon nga, dawata ang kwarta, apan butar bahin sa kanang pinasikat sa imong konsensya. Is it a good practice still of conscience, Father?
Okay, tinuod, it's a moral dilemma sometimes. Given our situation nga lisod ang kinabuhi, given our situation nga ang uban wala halos paigo nga income alang sa ilahang personal nga panginahanglan kada adlaw. So there's really a temptation to accept money, no, to receive money and be influenced in the way we vote because of the money. Pero bisan pag mo insist ka nga dawata lang ang kwarta niya, sunda ang imong konsensya. Again, I'd like to raise the question, what kind of conscience have you formed when you are willing to compromise the sanctity and the integrity of your choice because of the need for money? So ako personally, well, probably some ecclesiastical figures have said otherwise, pero ako, personally, I think it is being very inconsistent. That you receive money and then you say, I follow my conscience. I still think that it is morally questionable. Nga naman, tungod kay ang pagdawat og kwarta god, that is contributing to our systemic problem. What is the systemic problem? The problem of corruption. Now, once nga mo dawat kag kwarta, that means tabang ka sa sistema nga bawion ang maong kwarta kung sila na'y maglingkod sa posisyon sa gobyerno. And it creates a cycle of corruption. Nga naman, bawion nila ilang gasto, unya pasubrahan o gamay, kay mao ni po ipalit sa sunod eleksyon. Unsaon man nimo pag-expect og honest and transparent governance nga kinahanglan man mamawi ang mga naghatag og kwarta in the first place. So, kung sige tag yango sa kamaot sa atong kahimtang ekonomikanhon o politikanhon, pero nagdawat tag kwarta, we are not really part of the solution. We have already become a part of the problem. So ako, as a personal opinion, I find it morally inconsistent if you say, I take the money, but I vote according to my conscience.
All right. And of course, I think this will be somewhat like the last question for today. You know what, Father? A lot of people look on the government as something is dirty. No? And of course, kanang usahay ma-discourage ta mo participate, especially this coming election. I think some of the people will still remain not to cast their vote this coming election. What is your advice, no, to the voters karon, especially sa mga kabatan-una nato karon, Monsignor?
In the first place, we have to accept that the right to vote is a very important exercise of your freedom as a citizen and as a Christian. Usahay di wata kasabot sa kasaysayan kung giunsa nila pagpaningkamot nga makakuha ta ng maong kagawasan. So para nako usik kaayo nga dili nato gamiton. Usahay we are tempted to think nga unsa man gud akong buto usa ra man ka buok, it will not make a difference. Pero sa pagkatinuod, ang mga dagkong kausaban magsugod yun na og ginagmay nga mga kontribusyon sa katawhan. So if we are cynical, di ta mo appeal tungod kay way kausaban, wala gyud tay ma-expect nga kausaban inigabot sa panahon. Pero kung if we operate on the perspective nga kanang liso bitaw, nga mutanom lang ko sa akong liso. Nya kanus asya mo bunga naana sa mga kamot sa Ginoo. But someone has to plant the seeds of change. And your exercise of your right to vote is a way of planting the seeds of reform. Kung wala tay buhaton, mahitungod ana, we just leave murag destiny to guide us, then I think it is a great remiss of our duty as Christians nga mohatag ta og mitsa sa kausaban diya sa atong katilingban. Kay kung walay mo sugod, walay mo padayon, walay mamunga. So, don't think nga gamay ang imong boto, ikaw ra usa. Think of Noah in the Old Testament. Everybody was probably laughing at him. Unsa kuning gibuhat aning tiguanga, gagahimog arka, wa may uwan din he. Unsa koy nasod aning hunahunaa aning tiguanga nga naghagog-hagog himog arka. Nya naman ta sa Carmen, di man mabot ning dagat din eh. Okay? Everybody was probably laughing at him. But no one knew that he was doing the right thing. One small step at a time. And so he persisted. And we know the rest of the story. He was made an instrument of salvation by God. So ingan na tingali ang mentality nga akong ika-suggest labi na sa atong mga batanon, no, nga I think the greatest temptation of our time is to be cynical, to do nothing because we feel that we are insignificant. Pero atong hinumduman nga ang dagkong mga kausaban nagsugod yod sa lihok sa ginagmay nga mga tao. Unya, di gyud ta moundang og tanom sa liso sa kausaban ug atong butang sa mga kamot sa Ginoo kung kanus-an ni siya mamunga. Mao ni akong baruganan ana Ernest. No?
Thank you so much, Monsignor. No? And of course, thank you so much sa ato ang mga listeners or mga viewers karon nato online. Daghan kayo kung mga nakatunan karon, Monsignor, no? Especially for the last question and the last answer that you have thrown onto us. No? That is, small is very powerful. And even if you are just alone, no? When we collect it all together, of course, it becomes so much powerful that we can create or we can cast somewhat like change. No? So once again, thank you so much, Monsignor, and thank you so much for giving us your time, for having us, for imparting us your learnings. Let's give him a round of applause, guys. Sa ginaingon pa ni Albert Einstein, never do against your conscience even if the state demands it. Tuod man usa ka mahinungdanon og makabuluhanong buluhaton ang pagbutar ni ining umaabot nga eleksyon. I hope we have learned a lot from Msgr Parilla, and I hope we never fail to cast our vote with conscience. Right now, I will be calling our university president, Reverend Father Ruel Lero SVD, to give the certificate of appreciation to our resource speaker.
Mayong adlaw kanatong tanan. Ako usab sa ngalan sa Holy Name University, nagpasalamat ako sa atong pinasidunggang dinapit karubuntaga nga walain kundi lang atong tinahod nga Vicario General sa Diocese of Tagbilaran sa iyang paghahin og panahon alang kanato ug usab sa pagpaambit sa iyang hunahuna og kahibalo alang ini kaduhang hugno sa atong Voters Education webinar series. Og isip pagpasalamat tugot ako nga motunol kaniya niining atong Certificate of Appreciation. Ug ako sang basahon mo sang unod ani. Holy Name University, in partnership with the Diocese of Tagbilaran, Tagbilaran City, Certificate of Appreciation is given to the Reverend Monsignor Harold Anthony S. Parilla, JCL, for his invaluable insight shared as a resource speaker for voting right, upholding the truth, one-on-one with Monsignor Harold, as part of Choosing Life, a Voters Education webinar series. Given this 22nd day of March at the Immaculate Heart of Mary Seminary, the Loto District, Tagbilaran City, Bohol, in the year of our Lord 2022. Signed by yours truly as University President and Most Reverend Alberto S. Uy, D.D., Bishop, Diocese of Tagbilaran.
We will also be giving this certificate of appreciation to our reactor. Please allow me to read first the citation. Holy Name University, in partnership with the Diocese of Tagbilaran, Tagbilaran City, certificate of appreciation is given to Ernest Lee C. Tambis for his invaluable insights shared as the reactor for voting right, upholding the truth, one-on-one with Monsignor Harold as part of Choosing Life, a voters education webinar series. Given this 22nd day of March at the Immaculate Heart of Mary Seminary, Taloto District, Tagbilaran City, Bohol, in the year of our Lord 2022. Signed, Professor Josefina T. Semeni, the head of the Voters Education Committee, Father Nestorio H. Obali Jr. SVD, the Presidential Assistant for Religious Education and Mission, Father Ramilo Mapaye SVD, the Vice President for Academic Affairs, Father Ruel F. Lero, SVD, MAT, PhD, the University President, and Most Reverend Alberto S. Uy, DD, the Bishop of the Diocese of Tagbilaran. This certificate of appreciation will be given to our reactor by no less than our University President, Father Ruel F. Lero, SVD. Thank you so much. Ugmao kadto ang ikaduhang hugna nining atong online forum. Kini ang inyong anchor, Celso Tabaranza sa Holy Name University nang hinaot sa inyong pag-uban kanamo sa ikatulo nga hugna ning atong tulumanon, Choosing Life. Daghang salamat, pag-ampo ug pag-amping.